Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoy this video. For more content, please support us by subscribing.
One of the great stories of ancient history for me is a story about a general named Xenophon. He's an Athenian, he's a philosopher, he's an author, writes several books, and he writes books about his adventures as a part of it. Also spattered in there is his pragmatic philosophy. One of the adventures he writes is he finds himself in command of 10,000 soldiers. And they're part of a Persian war. Now, this is a civil war. And as they're on one side or the other, he finds his forces and him on the wrong side of the war. That's the losing side. And they have to force their way out of enemy-held territory. So in about 401 BCE, he is trying to fight his way out. And as he's trying to fight his way out, he finds that he gets the slip or escapes a little bit from those who are trying to pursue him, and he comes on some ruins. He describes these ruins, and about 2,500 years ago wrote this: "The Greeks marched on safely for the rest of the day and reached the river Tigris. There's a large deserted city. They're called Larcissa, which in the old days used to be inhabited by the Medes. It had walls 20 feet broad and 100 feet high, with a perimeter of 6 miles. It was built of bricks made of clay, with a stone base of 20 feet underneath." Later, in their adventures, they come upon another city, which is even bigger. From here, a day's march, 18 miles, brought them to a large undefended fortification near a city called Mesphilia. The base of the fortification was made of polished stone, in which there were many shells. It was 50 feet broad and 50 feet high. On top of it was built a brick wall 50 feet in breadth and 100 feet high. The perimeter of the fortification was 18 miles. This was huge by their standards. He was amazed to find out that there was this civilization and it was just abandoned. He asked some locals, "Where does this all come from? Who built this?" Their response to him was, "The Medes built it." Now, the locals are not right. The Medes really didn't build it. But 200 years ago, a place was known 200 years ago as Nineveh in Assyria. This is an early photograph of what Nineveh looks like today. All that is left are the hills and a few remnants. And it's amazing how a superpower like that, Assyria, goes from being the power in the world to being left that all there is mounds. And I try to figure out what it would be like for us today, to try and visualize it in our minds, because like a superpower like the United States of America, it is like the United States of America being overthrown in a relatively very, very short time, and there's a great political, military just black hole that now exists and just fades from the time. Here's how it happens. You start off with the power of Assyria. Sennacherib is a powerful king. He's out just creaming other nations. And when he's there, he glorifies Nineveh. He makes it an awesome city. And he lets everybody know how wonderful it is. In Sennacherib's day, the wall around Nineveh was 40 to 50 feet high. It extended for 4 kilometers along the Tigris River and for 13 kilometers around the inner city. The city wall had 15 main gates, 5 of which has been excavated. Each of the gates were guarded by stone bull statues. Both inside and outside the walls, Sennacherib created parks, a botanical garden, and a zoo. He built a water system containing the oldest aqueduct in history at Jirwan, across the Gomel River. He was succeeded by Ashurbanipal, who was also very powerful. But then there was always a challenge when rulers died. Sometimes there was a clear-cut ruler, a strong son, but sometimes, and a lot of times, there's multiple sons. There's multiple people who will claim that they want to be heirs, and there have to be civil wars. These civil wars will weaken Assyria at a time when they really can't afford it. By the time this last civil war happens, yes, one of the brothers takes over, he's in charge, but their army has been fighting itself and is a shell of what it used to be. And now they start to get incursions all around it. These little nomadic raids come from the north. And then Babylon seems to be a little uppity all the time for Nineveh, and they start to realize there's blood in the water. There is a coalition that comes, and the fall of the Assyrian Empire happens so rapidly. When the final attack on Nineveh comes, there's a couple prophecies about it that makes you realize here's what's going to happen. Nahum starts off, Nahum chapter 3, and just says, "Woe, the bloody city." He prophesies that it will be destroyed by an overflowing flood, would make an utter end of its place. It would be destroyed while the inhabitants were drunken like drunkards. The city would be unprotected because fire shall devour the bars of your gates. And they recently have excavated one of these gates and found that there are torch marks all along, and there were a lot of people there, bodies, and they could tell that they'd had defensive wounds on it and then killing blows. It was hand-to-hand combat in the gates at the end of Nineveh. The city would never recover, for, quote for Nahum, their injury has no healing. The downfall of the city would come at a remarkable ease, like figs falling when the tree is shaken. A famous oracle had given that Nineveh should never be taken until the river became its enemy. After a 3-month siege, rain fell in such abundance that the waters of the Tigris inundated part of the city and overturned one of its walls for a distance of 20 stades. Now, a stade, just so you know, is about 625 Roman feet, 185 meters. Or, if you really want to get it, 125 paces. So 20 stades is about 2.5 miles for those of you in America who want the 2.5 mile distance. Then the king, convinced that the oracle was accomplished, and despairing of any means of escape, to avoid falling alive into the enemy's hands, constructed in his palace an immense funeral pyre, placed on it his gold and silver in his royal robes, and then shutting himself up with his wives and eunuchs in a chamber formed in the midst of the pile, disappeared into the flames. Nineveh opened its gates to the besiegers, but this tardy submission did not save the proud city. It was pillaged and burned, and then razed to the ground so completely as to evidence the implacable hatred enkindled in the minds of subject nations by the fierce and cruel Assyrian government. From Google Maps, here's what remains. You can see a river. You can see the remains and a faint outline of some of the walls. I start this off because the destruction of Nineveh, and really destruction of Assyria, has its forebodings. Chapter 20 of Isaiah, or comparing it to Isaiah chapter 10, the destruction of Assyria is a type of the destruction of the wicked at the second coming. At the end, a few people will be left after the Lord comes again, and the remnant of Jacob will return in that day. So you start thinking, how does what we just talked about, and I did a really fly-by overview of the destruction of Assyria, how does that compare to the destruction of the wicked at the second coming of Jesus Christ? Well, here's just a few parallels. Before the second coming of Christ, there's prophecies that there will be internal conflicts or civil wars. The destruction of the wicked will be relatively rapid. There will be wars between nations. Sometimes we had wars and rumors of wars. That the wicked will have a sense of pride in them. Just like Assyria did, they have the belief that they would never be conquered, that their civilization would always stand fast and true, and there would be no end to their civilization. But isn't that like most civilizations? We all believe that we are the civilization that will never end. But for the wicked, will be prideful, have a stout heart. Their love of riches will be short-lived. It'll be taken. There will be an overflowing flood that will bring an end to the wicked. Now, my first thought about that was, yeah, when Christ comes in his glory, that's going to happen. But I read this verse from the dedication of the Kirtland Temple, that made me just kind of ponder. section 109, verse 70, it says, "Have mercy upon all their immediate connections, that their prejudices may be broken up and swept away with the flood, that they may be converted and redeemed with Israel, and know that thou art God." I think there is an overflowing flood that will precede that, a flood of righteousness and truth. And I just see God in the background always wanting anybody who's wicked, and that probably includes me too. I think it does. I just do my best, just like you do. But I'm not the perfect one. There's only one, that's Christ, who is perfect. But the overflowing flood of truth and righteousness brings an end to wickedness in our own lives. And the desire of God is that we too can be converted and redeemed and know that God is God. Inebriated with wickedness, the wicked will be like drunken like drunkards, Nahum says. Satan will leave the wicked unprotected, and just like with the fortifications in Nineveh, he will actually work to burn down your defenses the best he can. And unless we all return to Christ, the wicked will never recover, for their injury has no healing. Only through Christ. The downfall of the wicked will come with remarkable ease, and the wicked will be burned by fire. Now at this point in the chapter, Isaiah gives several promises of hope. He has this parallel of here's Nineveh, here's what's going to happen to him, and it's really kind of bad, but there is the promise one day that Israel will return to and rely on God. Isaiah has this chapter ending in hope because God's people will dwell in Zion. He teaches that there is a future day of redemption. It will come for God's people. You have to be patient. It's going to come because the burdens and oppressions that are given in the last days for the righteous will be removed because of the anointing by the Anointed One. And you may think that there's no hope for you, but part of one of those great messages of Isaiah is your delivery is already planned. It's going to happen. Just trust in God. Because the promise is, from the beginning of the chapter, and repeated 3 times before in the previous chapter, God's hand is stretched out still. And you may feel that you're underwater. You may feel that all hope is lost. You may feel that things are being burned down and every defense you have is going away. But God's hand is stretched out still. He wants to save all of us and help all of us. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me talking about Xenophon's discovery and the message of hope that Isaiah has for us in our lives. Have a great day. And any of you want a verse-by-verse commentary on chapter 20 or comparing it to Isaiah chapter 10, you can find that on brotherrmiller.wordpress.com. See ya.